Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making Action Happen. I'm Sarah Blackhurst.
And I'm Brian McCain.
And we have got the incomparable Representative Ty Winter from Honey, Colorado, but representing something like 87 counties in Colorado here with us today to just kind of talk about a little what happened with the special session. That was crazy. You and I were texting back and forth for most of it, and just a preview of coming events. So we've got POTUS coming into Pueblo tomorrow. I'll be there. Ty, are you going to be there?
No, ma'am. I've got a few more important things to do.
Which means he didn't make the invite list.
Oh, actually,
he did.
No, I know you did. I know you did.
I just, I got the important things to do.
Well, yeah. And it's quite a long trip to come up. So we appreciate you being here.
Anytime.
By the way, in case people don't realize it, Pueblo is a presidential stop. It always has been. I think we've talked about it before.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yep. I mean, as long as I've been alive, a president's been here in Pueblo.
So I didn't really understand that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that was happening, but I didn't know the whys until you explained it to me probably 2 or 3 years ago. But this is really quite interesting. Yeah,
it is. But the most interesting story of it was when George Bush Sr., actually, he was vice president. We'll start off with an anecdotal story. The Nature and Raptor Center, right? So they rehabilitate birds over by the Nature Center. So older George Bush is vice president. He comes in and he's going to release a bald eagle. So my dad was always in charge of the security for whenever a president came in. He has a picture with everyone on his wall. So Vice President Bush gets up there, and if you go to the Nature Center, there's this big cliff, and the idea is the film's there, the news, he's going to release this eagle, and it's going to fly off, totally rehabilitate it. Excuse me. And he releases it, and the eagle goes and hits a tree.
Shut up.
On the news, on live TV, on everything.
That's a rough
and I guess Vice President Bush goes, well, that's not a good sign. I'm planning on running for president.
That's a great story. Now, the thing about it is I could see why it's a stop. I mean, the prowess of Pueblo, especially when CF&I was in its glory. Just the thing about it is I just, things aren't good in the country right now. There's no doubt. Things aren't good in the world right now, and I just can't sit and listen to the pandering of voters. I mean, we definitely need some type of change in this country, and I hope the people of Pueblo that do attend kind of take a look at the policies and hopefully ask some tough questions when he comes to town because, small town Colorado, which Pueblo now is small town Colorado, we're suffering and we suffer a lot more. I mean, there's just a lot of crazy things going on. The cost of groceries, fuel's down now, but cost of fuel that we've been dealing with. And I think that, instead of this being a celebratory, I'm coming to Pueblo to talk about wind power, especially after we find out in Colorado that electric power is a lot higher than natural gas power in the state. I mean, hopefully people ask some real tough questions and aren't just blinded by the president's coming to town and actually, called to task some of the policy changes that his administration is instated and now the voters are paying for. So, I mean, as an elected official, I always, I take criticism, I take constructive criticism, and I get asked hard questions. And I think that, the razzle-dazzle of President Biden's coming to Pueblo shouldn't overshadow the issues that Puebloans are facing and all of Colorado.
If they let people ask questions.
Yeah, I don't.
Good point.
I'm
talking about being on a list. You're more important if you're on the question list.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think that there's any opportunity to ask any questions on that. It just, and I totally understand it. There's been times when we've had the governor or whatever, and you don't have to take questions, and he'll he would take questions or whatever, but it can get out of hand real quick, right? Because people, especially as you say right now, people have a lot of feelings about what's going on. So can we back up just a little bit because we had Beasley on, and that episode's already gone up to talk a little bit about what happened with the special session, and the big takeaway that I had from that conversation was, and I'm going to quote him on it, is that Coloradans largely got what they would have if HH would have passed. Now, HH lost by, 20, like a 20-point spread or so. So you were up there. You were in the thick of it. I came and saw you for a few minutes on Saturday, and it went Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday you guys were done. You were pretty weary and frustrated on Saturday. That was just day 2 of that. So can you tell us a little bit behind the scenes what you saw happening up there?
The reason we were down and out is we brought good legislation to the table. There was a few Republican bills ran. I think that they were all good. I think that they all had a purpose, and I think that they would have offered more tax relief to Colorado citizens in a different way. And it was frustrating because those bills died in committee on a party line vote. Like the task force bill, it was disheartening because Senator Byron Pelton and Assistant Minority Leader Rose Puglisi stakeholdered that bill for 6 months. And Rose set it up at the well. She looked at the representative that ran it and said, nothing against you, but basically your party took my bill, hijacked it, changed a couple things, and then ran it and passed it. And, she said, you guys talk about bipartisan, but bipartisanship isn't just Republicans jumping on Democrat bills. It's Democrats jumping on Republican bills. And I think she really hammered that home. But that's the disheartening thing is because we represent a large swath of voters in the state of Colorado. If you look at the House races, there wasn't a major point shift. I set it up in the well. They talked about a mandate for like the first month we were there last year, and they forgot what a mandate is because I believe the Colorado voters gave them a mandate when they looked at Prop HH and, some were calling it Operation Cookie Jar from the well. I likened it to the hokey pokey. You take one in, you take one out, you twist it all around, and that was the same thing. But what was even more disheartening is you literally had legislators take from Tabor. The citizens said no, do not touch Tabor. That was a referendum on Tabor, and you literally had legislators say, "You want to know what? We know better than you.
Yeah,
your voice. You made the wrong choice. So now we're going to step in and we're going to make this choice for you." And I really have an issue with that because, like I said at the while again, it's not me the people, it's we the people. And I think that we've gone away from that. We were talking earlier, it's no different than 181 and Prop 112 when the voters said hands off oil and gas. And then the state said, we know better than you. So this is 2 times this has happened now under this governor. And I think that, hopefully Colorado citizens, when they hit the ballot box next November, they're awake and they're still mad that, they literally have politicians at the Capitol, parenting them through their voting process.
Making the decisions for you because you made the wrong decision, basically. And you said when you talked to the reporter, why did you vote the way you voted? And what did you tell the reporter?
So they asked me on that, and then they asked me on the earned child tax income credits. That was the question that was asked yesterday. One of the reporters in Trinidad asked me, because right away they handed us all a list that showed in our district, how it affected our district. The issue I have is if we as representatives, I'm not going to say politicians, don't start making a stand and saying what is right and what's hard, then we're doing a disservice to my district. So I got up and said in the well, and I told the reporter this, I said, the reason I can't vote for this, I says, because the simple fact is what's behind it. I says, I have proud people in my district, proud coal miners, proud oil and gas workers, proud ranchers, farmers, small business owners, truckers, anything you can think of. But when the big arm of government and you at this Capitol pass legislation that kills the industries in my district, then then it's, we've got to give you this money like a drug. Here's this money because we killed your industries. And then when a representative stands up and says, I can't vote for this because it's condoning what you've done to my district and I'm going to draw the hard line, they try to use that guilt vote on you. Mm-hmm. And that isn't what my district needs. My district needs a representative that's going to go up and shoot it straight and tell the truth. And I feel like that's why I was elected. And I did tell them, you killed my industries. My people want to work. But you have taken their ability to work away from them, and now you want to backfill their income like a drug and say, here's this money. We're gonna and we're gonna keep giving you this money. What I say is take your hands off of our industries, let our people be proud, go back to work, earn for themselves, make a good living, a better life for their families, and everybody else in Colorado prospers. And I will draw that hard line because if we as elected officials don't start speaking the truth and not be afraid to get out there in the wild and fight back for our district and just keep condoning what they're doing by voting for handouts, I think that's a bigger disservice to my district than voting for a handout when my people want to work.
And you also said the voters already said no, so I voted no. I just voted the will of the voters.
The reporter asked me, what did you think about, that was about the money that took Tabor. She goes, what did you think? She goes, Senator Heinrichsen ran this bill, which is in opposition of what you said. I said, she goes, what's your answer? It was clear, one sentence. The people told me what to think. The people voted. I have no say in this, and I think that that's important to know is the people voted don't touch Tabor, and that was my answer.
And they did it anyway, even though that's what was voted for. What do you think is what? And I guess this is a weird way to ask this, but what do you think is the final line in the sand? So we've got 181. You were right about that. They said this is what we want, and so then the next session there's a whole package of bills that basically did what the voters said no to. Now we saw it again with the special session. What's the breaking point?
We had this discussion earlier, and I had this discussion with the reporter too yesterday. This is a time in Colorado where I hope the voters of Colorado will look and say, okay, we gave you the keys to the car, and now this is what we have. Some of the highest crime, highest inflation, energy prices are going through the roof because you threw a wet blanket on our economy, which when you killed the energy industry, you killed rural Colorado, small Colorado. I mean, we should have the steel mill fired back up, in my opinion, running 100%. Puebloans should be working at that steel mill. I mean, and that's a whole nother issue we can get into over, the climate politics and what it does to us. But what it comes down to is I hope the voters of Colorado are taking all of notes. They're seeing what's happening in their state, and they say, okay, we handed the keys to the car to you, and you wrecked the car.
Yeah.
Now we're going to hand it to somebody else to try. But what my fear is what we were talking earlier is I think is a fear of a lot of people in my party is I think last election cycle, we were very solid on our messaging. I think we were consistent, and I think we had a real message. Crime was crazy. Inflation was crazy. But at the end of the day, we'll get through primary election season. As the election rolls around, then it'll be January 6th, abortion and guns. And then, unfortunately, the powers that be throw that red stake in front of, the citizens, and then we tear each other apart. And are those things important? But politics used to be those things were important, but they hovered on the outside of what actually affected your life. Right. We should be talking about making it affordable for families to live in homes, find a way to build more housing. And that doesn't mean necessarily taking government subsidies to build housing. That means pulling the red tape and the regulations back and actually building housing instead of doing it in a confined box. Taking a look at our energy industry again and see if it's worth killing our economy and putting people out of work, which is your tax base, all for some finite numbers that at the end of the day, with the amount of smog that China and India pushes out, is minuscule. So is it worth throwing a wet blanket on our energy industry? So, I mean, I think these are the issues that we need to sit down and talk about as Coloradans, the kitchen table issues that actually affect us. And I think that, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to venture to say this, I think not only nationally, but I think in Colorado, the working people, the blue-collar Americans are realizing that the Republican Party has become the party of the blue-collar worker. We're the party of Big Tent now. And I think that people are starting to realize that, and we have the solution. So I hope the voters take these kitchen table issues, the things that are affecting their daily lives, and then they take a book from old-school politics, 90s and before, hey, these are issues that we're going to fight about, but for the good of our country and for the good of this state, we're going to pull together and actually work on the issues that we can. And if we have time, we'll beat the hell out of each other over these fringe issues that we do. And that's what my hopes are as a citizen, as a father, as a husband, as a son, and as a legislator, is that we can figure out a way to actually do the work for Colorado and keep the things that divide us when it comes down to our actual daily life to the side. And, if we've got time for that, let's battle over it, but let's get the real work done first. Yeah,
we always say that wedge issues, they only pop up in a big election.
Right.
And the ironic part, you can argue with the Roe versus Wade part, but, historically over the past 30 years, the issues that come up, the guns, abortion, that sort of thing.
And now it's insurrection. That's the new hot button.
But if you notice,
insurrection.
January 6th.
Nothing ever gets done. No. It's like and either side. It's not just one side. It's like we don't want anything done because we love to bring these up during an election, and we can fight about this while all this other stuff that really impacts you kind of goes on.
Well, and the things that are done, they're fought against. Sorry for interrupting, but the thing is, though, is even Ruth Bader Ginsburg knew that they were going to throw this back in the court's hands and it was going to be overturned because we're a federalist nation and this isn't a state-by-state issue. And people lost their mind. But the problem is that's because we don't teach kids civics anymore in school to realize that this is actually how our government works. And it's a good thing that the Supreme Court stepped in. And a republic is a country that's run by law. And they stepped in and did what they were supposed to do. They put it back to the states to do. Now, if it's changed by the voters in the future or if it's state-by-state legislation like we have here in Colorado, but part of it is people need to know the process. And you got to put down the news channels. You got to quit listening to the pundits, and you got to do some research and actually know how your government works. And I think that that's very important for us to do as legislators I talked at, I think, 7 or 8 schools this year. And did I talk about party politics? No, because that isn't my job. I went in and taught them the Bill on the Hill process. This is how it goes. This is what I do. Now, if they ask me tough questions, I'd look at the teacher and they'd say, answer it. That's fine. 1 or 2 questions. But kids need to know the process and how to be involved. And unfortunately, a lot of adults need to know that too because they've been, left behind. And I think it's very important that you know the process of how things work. And then I think that that'll stop some of this because imagine how many people, if they knew how that was supposed to work, might not have had such a visceral reaction.
Yeah, and even the Supreme Court, they took up some other issues that the conservatives were pushing. And remember, after that, it was, you turn on CNN or MSNBC and it's like the Supreme Court's gone full right wing. They're going to strip us of our rights and all this stuff. But then some more liberal sided issues came up and the Supreme Court supported that. And to me, that you saw the rhetoric die down a bit.
The lady holding the scales.
That they said, oh, wait a minute, they're not going, party line votes. Their job is very specific, and they held to that on various issues. Because I think when the Roe v. Wade went up, then everybody saw it as an opportunity to all the wedge issue type stuff. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's unconstitutional. And it pissed the conservatives off and vice versa, So it is balanced. It's not, the Supreme Court is the highest court. And it doesn't have a basketball court in it too. They call it the highest court, so there's a basketball court in the Supreme.
That makes sense.
And that's the highest court in the nation. But they have a specific job, and it's about the Constitution, and that's all they're concerned about, not party politics.
Right.
Well, but let's be honest. When we're talking those wedge issues, that's our definition. Those are great fundraiser issues.
Yeah, the fundraising
and that's
issues,
why they keep coming up. I mean, if we're going to be really honest, they serve two really important purposes. One, what you alluded to was it's a distraction, right? They're able to get everybody focused on those wedge issues. They're bringing in a whole lot of money. The parties are bringing in a whole lot of money to keep you focused on that. In meantime, and this was such a great example of this at this last session, this special session. They're able to get a whole lot of other things done that nobody else is going to pay attention to.
That's right.
Because nobody's talking about them, and they are able to get some really crazy things done. And we saw kind of a very cool example. I wanted to hear from you on this. I say cool example because we always look at it from a strategy piece.
Well, you're geeking out.
We're geeking out, right? So, and I don't want to give it too much air, but I want to give some energy to your colleague who I was deeply inspired by. But there was one piece that was in this, and we talked a little bit about this with Beasley, but there was one thing that came up. It was like Senate Bill 002, and it was about basically making sure that kids who get EBT or whose families use EBT funds to feed their family, that during summer school that those would be expanded. So everybody's like, this is a weird kind of thing to put in when we're talking about taxes, but it needs to be done. So everybody's like, okay, it's cool. And that was completely hijacked. So tell us a little bit about that.
It was propagandized. That's the only word it can be used. There was definitely some tension. I mean, basically with the riots that you're seeing all over the country right now. Representative Ron Weinberg, he's part of the Jewish caucus in our membership, and there was a pro-Palestinian amendment run on that bill, and what it was to not allow import of certain products. But the whole idea behind it was pretty disgusting, and I don't want to get into all the details, but it definitely got crazy at the end of session. On Sunday night, was it? I think it was Sunday night it started, and then it carried into Monday morning. We had the gallery shut down. We actually had a legislator leave the floor and go sit in the gallery and scream at Representative Weinberg while he spoke. And what's upsetting about this is I watched the comments that she made down in the well and how it pained him and it cut him. It cut all of our caucus because the Mighty 19 all got behind Ron right away. There was no doubt. And, he gave her time to speak. And even though she was saying that his people were committing genocide, she made some remarks from the well that, I give him the respect. I don't know if I could have kept my cool that long. And he let her speak. And then when it was his turn to speak, silenced him. Well, not silenced him, but screaming from the well, from the gallery, obscenities. And it really, it was really disheartening. And then, we had protesters come in and screaming and yelling. Here's the thing. I'm all about First Amendment rights. But there's a set of rules, and you can't scream and yell in the gallery. Like when the kids from East, or I think it was Denver East last year, to come talk to us about the guns, they came in. They came and sat in the gallery. They didn't scream and yell, some of them. There were some of them that did, and they got kicked out last session, and that was in the news. But the majority of them were peaceful, and they talked to us, and they did it the right way. But this was definitely to grab news headlines. I guess it happened last night at Denver City Council.
I saw that this morning. Yeah.
So it was really upsetting, and it was an honor to stand up there with my colleagues beside Ron as he pushed back against that rhetoric. And he actually, I think, did a very good job of defending rural Colorado and small-town Colorado, because he basically got up and told the supermajority, our constituents and us legislators up here on the Republican side deserve enough respect for you to take our bills seriously and what they do for our constituents instead of just killing everything on party line vote because you got the big stick. And I think, hopefully he got to some of those people, because at the end of the day, like I said, this mandate that they talk about, when you look at the percentage of vote, it wasn't a mandate. We represent a large swath of Colorado, the Republican Party up there. And I think that, a lot of stuff that would help our district, they just shoot it down on party line. And I think he did a good job of trying to say, hey, you got to just quit pushing us around. We're part of this conversation too. And I think he also highlighted how the makeup of the legislature has changed. There's definitely some very, very far left progressives, and I think that you see that split right now in the legislature. You see your conservatives. So the makeup of the legislature is really crazy right now, but I thought he did a good job of trying to fight for people outside the Metroplex and their voices, and our voices as legislators to represent them.
So I heard Marianne Goodland reported that towards the end of his remarks, the rest of the floor stood up as well.
Yes.
And I thought that's what happened.
Yes. No, that is what happened.
You can't see that on the video.
No, that is what happened. And there was some people that weren't in the chamber. I'm not going to say that there wasn't. There was some people that had left the chamber, and that's common there. If you're in disagreement, some people just don't want to hear it. So they go have a cup of coffee on the side. But there was a handful of our colleagues on the other aisle that did stand up when Ron. And I will say this. That morning, I thanked a lot of them from the floor because my daughter was in a serious accident. They sent me flowers. About half of the caucus texted me, "We hope your daughter's okay." And that was a moment in that morning that was a happy moment of humanity. But there was also that sad moment, but humanity pulled through when, Ron started to speak, that the other side stood up, and it was at least an acknowledgement to what he was saying. But at the end of the day, it's a long time between now and when session starts, and we'll see if those feelings carry over and if they actually give us a seat at the table or just try to put us in the corner like baby.
Yeah.
Do you think going into this next session, do you think there will be more opportunity for both parties to work together, or do you think they're going to shut out one side?
Here's the deal is we got to look at history. I've been playing politics now for 5 or 6 years. We've been shut out all the time as an elected official up there. There was I think out of a few of the bills I ran, there was a couple that really, if it wasn't partisan, should have made it through. And I saw that with a lot of my colleague bills. Representative Bottoms ran a bill to cut income tax, and the governor gets up during the HH debate, "Oh yeah, we want to do this." We had it packaged in our bill because they had the renter stuff packaged in the bill. That was our counter. But at the end of the day, we're going to see, because he bragged about cutting property taxes, and at the end of the day, we'll see if he allows his party to support us, because there is a third chamber at the Capitol, and I think a lot of things get run by the governor. And I think he gives a lot of direction on how the vote goes, and we'll see if it's serious talk, if that was serious at the table, or if that was just politics.
Well, he's been talking about that since he came into office, and the party hasn't. The party has given him so much pushback that I don't think there's been real follow through on that, because he has been talking about that. And I heard at the inauguration this year, somebody their person was getting interviewed, but they're Democrat, and they ripped in at the inauguration. They ripped into the governor, and he said has some pretty choice things to say about him. This was his second inauguration, but it was interesting, and it's along those lines. Like it's kind of a weird dynamic, and if you're not up there, so I can't be there for more than 2 or 3 days in a row without kind of losing my mind a little bit. I don't know how you do. It's a very different, because you're siloed in this building.
The fishbowl.
Yeah, and you're like the drama sort of feeds on itself, and pretty soon like people start to say and do some things that you would think like, Are you okay? You want to go? Are you okay? Is there something? Do we need to have a mental health check on you? What's going on that you would act like this?
It is. It's draining. It's mentally exhausting. It's physically exhausting. Average of 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and that's what's hard about the process. And I'm going to say this: it's set up for legislators to fail. You have 5 bills that you have to run, then you have all your committees, then you have to go through the committee's bills, then you have to go through everybody else's bills. So unfortunately, it's and I will say this, that the system's flawed in a way, and it's set up for legislators to fail. I mean, if you were really to give all that, and I know the arguments could be, well, maybe this should be a full-time job, and I think that's the last thing. I think it should be a shorter session with less bills, is my opinion. But I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and then emotions fly, and then you get into these wedge issues. That's when we saw a lot of combative stuff last year with the wedge issues. You throw that in the mix. But no, you're right. And that building, you can feel the heaviness when you walk in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You can feel the heaviness.
The energy changes. The second you go through security, the energy changes.
You don't eat well. You don't sleep well. I mean, you don't drink enough water. You really don't take care of yourself because the day flies.
Yeah.
So, it's a total different world up there. And that's why, I really respect, especially the legislators that come from a long ways to do it, because I think you really know their heart's in the right place. Yeah. I'm not saying the others aren't, but they, a lot of them leave their businesses, they leave their families,
there's
they leave
more
their
sacrifice
whole life, and there's a lot of
rural.
sacrifice, and I really respect that because, I think that they really want to get up there and make a change. Like I said, I'm not knocking anybody that's an hour out or 20 minutes out, 5 minutes out. I just think that, that sacrifice is commendable, and especially with everything that we go through. But I think that a lot of people have a servant's heart that are there and that are in that for the right reasons. That's why I'm there. I truly want to represent my people, and I want to do it the right way, and not the popular way, the right way. So I think that, good people are trying to make a difference. And, I think as long as you have those good people involved in the mix, we may not, win the battle all the time, but I think that, we're making ground, and I think people are starting to see, which people are consistent, which message is consistent, and, which message actually is going to affect their lives. And that's my hopes.
So what's really interesting about Colorado, there's a lot of things that are really interesting about Colorado, but one of the things is that right now we have the highest number of unaffiliated voters in the country.
I still think that's because the open primary.
And the driver's license too.
Yeah. I really think.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sorry. We've had like Beasley talk about it, and a few other people saying this is a shift like more to the middle. We're not Republican or Democrat. I still think it's just for the primary. I think it didn't change people's political views, and the driver's license part of it too. I think there's more unaffiliateds because that's a cooler place to be, so you could vote as a Republican or a Democrat in the primary more than anything.
And then now when you get your driver's license, if you don't pick a party, they register you unaffiliated. So you're registered to vote when you get your driver's license. I think that was a law passed, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So when you get your driver's license, they ask you, and if you don't pick, then you're registered unaffiliated.
That's pretty interesting.
So there.
So there.
Take that.
So I guess it's not that cool of a thing. I'm like,
Well, no, I mean, but I think that plays to it, and I think that what Brian said, it's, I think people want to be able to play that primary for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, but we have, so to like kind of refute my argument then you have Commissioner Grego here in Pueblo who went unaffiliated for political reasons because he felt that the Democrat Party does not represent the values that he had, and he went unaffiliated. And I think you're going to see some more of that. We had one person on school board elected that's unaffiliated, previously a Democrat. So it is changing. When you start, I think it'll mean more when you start to see more locally elected officials that are unaffiliated versus Republican or Democrat. Then that's when you'll really be able to gauge if this is a political movement or it's just because my driver's license registered me that, or I want to vote in the primaries.
Well, I think one of the big indicators of a change was HH in and of itself, because usually without increasing by lowering your taxes, usually the voters go for that, and that's what you thought it was going to win.
I thought people were going to read it just looking at their property tax bill and saying like, I don't want to pay this much for property tax. And they, most people don't read past the first 3 lines, and that was a very complicated issue. So even in the Blue Book, you had information in the Blue Book that contradicted the information that had been put out by both sides, which was confusing as well. But it didn't pass, so people, I guess they did pay attention. They don't want their Tabor money touched.
And I think that's the bigger point. And it's when we talk about the Tabor part of it, the interesting thing to me, and for those of you who are not listeners who are not in Colorado, Tabor is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and it's unique in Colorado. No other state has it. And it basically says, look, we don't want you, our government, our state government, to get too big, to overspend, and before you do anything with our tax dollars, you better come back and ask us if it's okay. If it's okay to increase your taxes, if it's okay on any of those things. And it's really because we don't trust our legislators. No offense meant. But they're passionate about it. Like Collins are not kidding about Tabor.
And then the government says, okay, so you don't want your taxes raised, so we'll just add a new fine.
Or a fee.
A fine, or whatever.
We'll add
then
a user fee.
What the legislature seems to love to do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like out of every session, there's a whole bunch of new committees that are decision-making committees with no oversight, no checks and balances.
They get rid of their oversight. Last year was it the CIGCC or the one that had to do with law enforcement? Remember they let that committee sunset?
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. Committees that look over, they allow to sunset because they don't want that oversight.
Well, and then all these committees are like, oh, a bill comes up and it's too overreaching or it's too whatever. So they go, well, let's make a study out of it. And let's create a committee that can tell us what this study is about or what we need to do. And then they come back. They may or may not come back, but decisions get made without the legislature even really being involved.
I think I brought it up on the show before. I'm going to look it up. So keep talking because this is funny.
Yeah. I think that's because nobody wants to. I think that comes down to saying what's right and not what's popular sometimes. I think nobody just wants to roll up their sleeves and do the work because it's easy to push it off on the blame of a study or a committee than just, making a decision and having to wear that decision, good or bad. And I think that's the problem is I'm not saying this for all things because there has to be committees for some things, but I think a lot of times we try to figure out a way to set ourselves up so if there is failure that there's no blame to be given. And I think that, as a leader, when you're wrong, sometimes you got to be willing to stand up and say you're wrong. And I think that's part of being a leader. But I think people try to insulate themselves with a lot of this stuff. Maybe I'm off base, but I think that a lot of this stuff is used to insulate.
Well, and to be fair, we ask the legislators to be experts on things that they could not possibly be experts on. So you want to go, oh, I need a little more information. I need some subject matter expertise on this to be able to make a decision. And then, but that's a tough thing. Okay, what'd you find?
So in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA after World War II, they have the Simple Sabotage Field Manual and General Interference with Organizations and Productivity. So this is for large organizations. Have you ever heard this?
Oh, this is so good.
This is great, and it goes down to like the workers to the employees. So it's how to disrupt like an organization or a company or a board or anything like that, or a legislature. A state legislature. It's insist on doing everything through channels. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. Make speeches. Talk as frequently as possible and at great length. Illustrate your points by long anecdotes and accounts of personal experiences. Never hesitate to make a few appropriate patriotic comments. When possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5 people. Bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible. Haggle over precise wordings of communications, minutes, and resolutions. Refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting and attempt to reopen the question of the advisability of that decision. Advocate caution, be reasonable, and urge your fellow conference to be reasonable and avoid haste, which might result in embarrassments or difficulties. Be worried about the propriety of any decision. Raise the question of whether such action is contemplated with lies within the jurisdiction of the group or whether it might conflict with the policy of some higher echelon.
Okay, just for the listeners, if you missed it, will you say what you're reading from again?
This is the Simple Sabotage Field Manual from OSS on how to interfere with organizations and productivity.
If that didn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But that's exactly what we're looking at because he's brought that up before, and I just sit there and I go, I get a little bit sick to my stomach, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
And it goes. Everybody should Google it because it goes into managers and supervisors, office workers, employees, which you could just substitute with, elected officials and, a board. But here's where it kind of gets crazy. How many times of every issue we're dealing with, and this isn't just like the legislature, this is everything. How many times have we heard like homelessness is a problem? Let's start a committee. Let's start another committee. Let's do this study. Let's talk about it. It's exactly this. And then the committees that they make, it's always 11 people, then it turns into 17 people. And now I think I sit on one for it's like mental health and housing, which somehow two of them got combined. And I get it, they're connected, but it went from an 11-person board committee to 3 committees with like 37 people on each committee, and nothing has been done in the 5 years that I've been part of this.
Of course.
And it's literally word for word on how to do this, how to not get something done. The whole point of this manual or whatever was basically how to kill productivity to solve problems. And this is how you do it. And it's written out here.
Crazy, right?
Crazy.
Sorry to go on a tangent.
No.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting.
Both of us geeks appreciate that a little bit more than we should.
So I'll go on another tangent. So one thing that I think it's in the Philippines. So they have their special operations unit, and then they have the officers and the enlisted, and they always fight. And this kind of goes to a tweet that just sent out that said enlisted people should never become officers, which I'll go in depth next time, which is total BS. But one thing they do is they get the leaders and the enlisted people together, and they always have this problem of decision-making between the leaders, kind of like, politics, basically. So they lock them in a room for 3 days and make them drink. And they do not let them leave. They're in like a gymnasium, 50 people in there, and they give them booze, and they're like, you guys need to get drunk and sit there. And like the idea behind it's like, if they're drinking, they're going to get in fights and they're going to lose their inhibitions, and stuff's going to be said and stuff's going to be resolved at the end. And they found, and no other military does it, and I probably know why, but they found that was the best way to squash bad decisions and trust and untrust amongst the people. So
putting it all on the table.
Yeah, basically. And, I always said, like, maybe we should get all the legislators in a room and here's a bottle of whiskey.
Whiskey Wednesdays at the Capitol. Every week.
And if you don't drink, I'm sure there's other legal substances in Colorado that
there's anything
the side of the aisle you're on probably partakes in.
Right. So, there's a lot more that are legal.
Let's get in and get out.
But the important thing, and I know it's funny, but it kind of squashes that. You go in there, you feel this way about yourself and other people, and they're kind of right. It's like, yeah, if you're getting hammered with somebody right there, like, all that's going to come up, and then you kind of get reset to zero, and you gain that respect, or you end up hating each other forever afterwards. Right. But it gets that pretension out of the way, and that pretending, who you are and who somebody else is. I kind of like that, but that'll never fly. It's unhealthy to drink.
You shouldn't do it.
Sorry, again, another tangent. I don't get to do this often. So.
Yeah, and we don't get to have Ty with us very often, but we love to have these conversations because you're just always very honest about what you feel. You're not worried about it. So,
couple more minutes.
Okay,
he's got to go.
I was going to say, as we wrap this up, we know what your worries are. What are some bright spots for you in this coming session? Because we're all worried about this session. Especially because there's going to be a whole lot of posturing because it's in an election year.
I'm actually excited for this session. I mean, running for office was one thing, but actually being elected and going back in the district and talking to people, it's just a different vibe, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, you're the candidate, and then when you're the guy, I talk to a lot of people, and they really respect what we're doing, and they see the fight, and that's on both sides of the aisle. I've had people approach me from both sides of the aisle and be like, because like I've said over and over again, I'm going to say this: it isn't in Pueblo, the rest of southeastern Colorado, all 9 counties in my district. It isn't as much Republican versus Democrat, it is rural versus urban. We talked about the other night at the Trinidad thing. And, because most Democrats in southeastern Colorado are Kennedy Democrats. They love the country, they love the flag, they're conservative, most of them are Christian, whatever you want to say. So our beliefs align up. So I think that where I'm excited is I think we're starting to see that people are starting to believe there is a rural-urban divide, and we're actually starting to get together and fight for our area. And we're not always going to agree, but, at the end of the day, this is about saving our communities for our businesses, our families, and surviving, because we're important too. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to talk to all the people in the district. I'm excited to go back and fight for the values that I said I was going to fight for. Like I said, I was elected by a certain amount of people to go up and fight for those values. I think I really did that while getting things done for everybody in my district. So I'm going to continue to follow that beacon of the voters that put me in that seat, continue to get things done. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to the process prospect of a new year. I mean, it's a new year. You shed off the old year. I've learned a lot. That's another thing I'm excited. I'm not going in as a freshman, so I understand how it works now. So I think that there's some things that we're gonna get done. I sure hope there is. And then if not, you just put your shoulder into it a little bit more. You dig in a little bit tighter. You become, I hate to say it, a little bit more obstinate, and you fight for your people, because at the end of the day, they're who sends you there. And, to represent people, you have to talk to your people and listen to them. And I think that they gave me a strong, clear voice. And then it was backed up. What was really nice is it was backed up by the mandate of HH. So, I mean, not only do you have that beacon that you're pushing for, and you got that line that they give you to tow for them, but then knowing that, the state is hopefully the voters are becoming more aware and awake of what's happening. I hope that carries through into special session or into the new session, and it gives us an opportunity to have a real strong cornerstone to stand on and say, hey, our voters have spoken. The people of Colorado have spoken, even not in our district. Now let's get the work done. Let's quit hee-hawing around. Let's get the work done for the people. So that's the attitude I'm going to take up there this year. And I just, for those of you in House District 47 that watch this, just know that I'm going to go up there with your voice and your intentions, and I'm going to fight for everything that you asked me for, and I'm excited for that. I'm also excited to see my colleagues. You become a little family, the Mighty 19, you become a family. It was good to see each other before Thanksgiving, but to get back in that groove. So it's going to be a good year, and if not, we're going to make it a good year.
I love it. Representative Winter, thank you so much for being with us again.
Anytime.
We appreciate it. We appreciate you and all the work you do, and the miles and just the dedication and the servant leadership with which you represent your in our area, in our communities.
Yep. Action 22 does not endorse candidates during an election season, but we do support our membership. So if you're a candidate, we invite you to come on, speak about the issues, speak about your views, speak about your campaign. Doesn't matter. The views and opinions expressed on Making Action Happen do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Action 22, its board, or its membership, except for Prop HH. We were opposed to that.
Chad Vorthman, I know you're listening, and I will not be taking any fashion advice from you in the future, but I appreciate your input. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks.
Merry Christmas.